we're going to try to make basically the simplest React app we possibly can. So, one thing we know we need is a single HTML element that's going to be replaced with a React component. So in our HTML, and remember on CodePen, you don't need HTML, head, body, all that stuff. You just start writing the body. So all I need here is a single div. I'm going to give it an ID of root. It doesn't have to be an ID of root. That's just most common. It's good to have an ID of something so that there's no conflict. All right. Then we also need the actual React library. Now you can put a script tag in your HTML for that. That's not how we'll be doing it long term. But on CodePen, they make it really easy. So under settings, under JavaScript, you can add some external scripts down here. So you can paste in whatever URL you want. Or they have some that are here very accessible. Under quick add, we want React and React DOM. And what this is going to do is it's going to put those script tags in there for us. We won't see them. It's happening in the background, but it's going to add those. So there's React and React DOM. React DOM, because we're on the web. There's also React Native for building actual compiled native apps for iOS and Android. So since we're on the web, we need React DOM. But the React library is the same whether you're doing web or native. And we need one more thing. Because we're using JSX, we also need something to pre-process our JavaScript. Because, again, JSX is not real JavaScript. It's not on track to become a standard. It's just plain an extension to the language. So we need something that translates that into real JavaScript. So we need a build process at this point. Basically, compilation, but we're not really turning it into bytecode or machine code or anything like that. We're just turning it into real JavaScript. So JavaScript preprocessors are right here. You can add them in CodePen very easily. Babel is what we're looking for. So Babel can do two things. Well, it can do more than two things. But to oversimplify, it can turn JSX into real JavaScript, and it can turn bleeding edge JavaScript into older versions of JavaScript. So Babel also lets you use the very latest JavaScript features, and it'll translate them down into JavaScript that will actually run in a browser. And you can configure it very highly. You can make it all go back to ES5 if you want to. We don't need to go that far necessarily, but the defaults are fine for us. So we'll just add Babel and be done with it. So then we need a React component. We're not going to look at this HTML ever again, so I'm just going to get it out of my face and focus on the JavaScript. We never need to look at it again. That's the only time we'll touch the HTML. Every other bit of markup will be JSX. So I need a component. So because I've already added React itself, I can just say class app, I'll call it app, extends, inherits from React.component. So we need to inherit from that class because there's a little bit of stuff that gets taken care of by doing that. Every class component has one method that is absolutely required, and that is render. So we need a render method, and that render method needs to return some JSX. So we can just make it return some very simple JSX. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it in parentheses because that'll let us put it on more than one line. But I would not absolutely have to do that if it were a one-liner. H1, hello world, why not? So now we have a component. That's an entire component right there. Almost as simple as it can get, but not quite. And then the last thing we need to do is replace that one element on the DOM with this component. And for that, we need React DOM.render. And we need to tell it which component we're putting in there. So when you make a component, you're really kind of making a custom tag. So if I want to put that on the page, I can just put app, exactly the name of my component, capital letter and all. I can put it right in there. JSX is more like XML than HTML, which means, among other things, you must have a closing tag for everything. So empty elements like images and inputs and stuff like that, what you do is you make a self-closing tag. This doesn't have any children. There's nothing in between the opening and closing tags, so we could just make this one tag. And you just have to make sure you put, to make sure that your computer's still responding first. Yes?
So I'm trying to understand how React components functions work, and is every single React component, I think, going to have a render function and a return value?
Every one that is a class. There is another way of doing it that I'll show you a little later. Goodness sakes, what's going on here? I have this URL copied. Where'd that go? I guess I'll kill it. Come on. What I was trying to say is that okie dokie, this isn't ideal. There we go. A self-closing tag like that. Just put a slash before the closing angle bracket and you've got an opening and closing tag all in one. So we need to tell it what component we're putting in there as JSX, and we need to tell it what element of the page we're replacing. So you can use any of the methods you're familiar with for grabbing this, like document.getElement by ID is fine. The query selector is also fine. And there it is. It works. We've replaced this one element with our React application. Now, lines like this, what we're really saying is something like react.create element app. Well, just app in this case. That's what we're really doing there, but it's a lot easier to write it as tags, especially when you have ones that are really just DOM elements underneath the hood. So that is pretty much the simplest possible React app. Questions about that? We'll make it a little more interesting.